BJ Mafia was poppin'. Jags fans, the first wave of 2024 NFL free agency period has officially concluded. Trent Baalke has been in the lab and he put together a masterclass this offseason. I have been thoroughly pleased with the job that he has done with a majority of his moves. And while I have been very critical of Baalke in the past, and rightfully so, I have been very pleased with the job he's been doing. It brings a lot more excitement going into the draft and going into next season. And we're going to talk about that here all today, from the franchise tag, guys that we've re-signed, guys that have walked, and of course, brand new guys here in the building. But before I go ahead and dive deep into all of that, Jags fans, if you guys appreciate the work and the content that I make here on YouTube, make sure you guys go ahead and drop me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. And make sure that you guys also go ahead and follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below so that you guys can go ahead and check that out. But Jags fans, let's go ahead and get into today's 2024 full free agency recap for the Jaguars. Now, the first player that we're going to be talking about here today is going to be with the Jaguars' best defensive player, Josh Allen, who put together a career-high season on the fifth-year option for the Jaguars. Josh Allen put together a career high in both sacks, quarterback hurries, and quarterback pressures. He was phenomenal and an absolute catalyst for the Jaguars front seven. He should have been in the Defensive Player of the Year race, but of course, you're not going to get any love here in Jacksonville if you ball out. Josh Allen last season, 17.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, an interception, 54 quarterback hurries, and 90 quarterback pressures. He was sensational all of last season, but the Jaguars opted to franchise tag him instead of giving him a long-term contract extension, and the Jaguars have until July 15th if Josh Allen signs that franchise tag tender to negotiate a long-term contract, something similar like we saw with Evan Ingram last season, getting the franchise tag before reaching a long-term contract agreement. Josh Allen should absolutely be paid north of $100 million. And while I do believe that Josh Allen will get his money north of $100 million, which is well-deserved because he's been a veteran, a leader on and off the field, he embraces the city and the culture here in Jacksonville. He will get his money. It's all going to come with time. I just hope that Josh Allen does get every single penny that he deserves because we embrace him here in Jacksonville, and obviously he embraces the culture here in Jacksonville. Now let's go ahead and get into two players that have walked this offseason. The first one's going to be with former first-round pick back in 2020, K'Lavon Chaisson. He now joins Laviska Shenault and CJ Henderson as 2020 draft bust to now go to the Carolina Panthers on a one-year deal up to $5 million in incentivized money. And while Chaisson is not a big loss, it does kind of suck to see him go because, I like to troll with you guys. I like to say that, this guy's going to be the next big thing for the Jaguars. Of course, he's not. This loss doesn't mean anything for the Jaguars. He never developed as a pass rusher, but you know what? I wish him well in Carolina, but the big loss for the Jaguars this offseason was, of course, with wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who signed a 4-year, $92 million, $50 million in guaranteed money with the Tennessee Titans. And I did listen to a little bit of a clip from his presser with the Titans, and he did say that he wanted to stay in Jacksonville. He wanted to be a Jaguar, but of course, $50 million in guaranteed money, $92 million up to in incentives. That money is going to talk, especially in a state like Tennessee with no state income tax, just like Florida. Of course, he was going to go and chase the bag. So look, as upset as I am that Calvin Ridley went to a divisional rival, and you know what? I do wish him the well. I do wish him best because he's got generational wealth. He's worked his ass off to get that kind of money. Look, he's got Will Levis throwing him the football. I'm not too scared about the Tennessee Titans. Even though they have DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, Calvin Ridley, and Tony Pollard, they are putting together some pieces. But nonetheless, I am not scared of the Tennessee Titans. I do wish Calvin Ridley well, though. Now let's talk about a couple of players that the Jaguars have re-signed this offseason. Let's talk about former 2020 fifth-round selection out of Auburn, Daniel Thomas, who signed a 2-year, $6 million contract up to $4 million in guaranteed money. I love this re-signing. It's not going to make a big splash. It's not going to make big news, but he's a guy who's very charismatic. I've met the guy personally. He's a great athlete, and of course, he's huge on special teams, and the Jaguars, they value their special teams players. They put a lot of emphasis on that, and Daniel Thomas is a great guy to add to that phase of a football team on phase 3 with special teams. Let's also talk about Ezra Cleveland, who re-signed on a 3-year, $24 million contract, $14.25 million of that in guaranteed money. You have your starting left guard of the future as of right now in Ezra Cleveland, and I really like this re-signing. But anything the Jaguars can do to continue to bolster the offensive line and especially to protect my franchise quarterback, I'm happy with it. Some people think that this is an overpay, but I do think if you have more chemistry and continuity with the offensive line, where the Jaguars were very banged up last season, you're going to see this team flourish, and I really like seeing Ezra Cleveland back here in Jacksonville. The Jaguars also re-signed both Caleb Johnson, linebacker, a guy who's going to be valuable on special teams, and D'Ernest Johnson, a guy who can be the second or third back, a change of pace back from a guy like Tank Bigsby and a guy like Travis Etienne. D'Ernest Johnson, when he did get his carries, he was explosive, and I'm very excited to have both of these guys back here in Jacksonville. And the Jaguars also restructured the contract of right guard Brandon Sheriff, which saved about $5 million on the cap. And while that move may not make a lot of big news, that was valuable for the Jaguars in order to have some more cap flexibility to go ahead and make some more signings, which is now what we're going to be talking about. Now, before I actually go ahead and get into the guys that we signed, the Jaguars actually made a very surprising trade. Former first-round pick back in 2021 from the New England Patriots. The Jaguars traded a 6th-round pick for quarterback Mac Jones, a guy who's obviously born and raised here in Jacksonville, played high school football at Bowles High School. And Mac Jones, a lot of Jaguar fans flipped out about this signing. Why are we trading a 6th-round pick for a young quarterback like Mac Jones when we could potentially be using that 6th-round pick as ammunition to move up in the draft? And while I do think that is a valid talking point, I do believe that Mac Jones at a young age can be a quality backup to a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, he's not going to be competing for a starting job, but you know that if Trevor Lawrence gets dinged up and you need a backup to come into the game, you know Mac Jones can come in there and he can be at least stable to go out there and run an offense. I trust him a lot more than I do CJ Beathard at this point in his career. And look, Mac Jones never got a fair opportunity in New England to not only be the successor of the greatest quarterback in NFL history in Tom Brady, Mac Jones also did not have a fair opportunity with the skill position guys around him. Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like, let's be serious, you guys. New England never put a good team around him. The skill position group was horrible, and he also had defensive coordinators as his offensive coordinator. You get a guy who's young, a guy who's still really unproven, still has a lot of room for growth, and he can just develop behind Trevor Lawrence. And you have an insurance plan in case Trevor Lawrence gets hurt. And you know what? Mac Jones, I'm actually happy to have the guy here in Jacksonville. Now let's go ahead and talk about the guys that the Jaguars have signed this offseason that are going to be new here in the building. And the Jaguars were obviously very busy on day one. Let's go ahead and talk about that. Mitch Morse from the Buffalo Bills is going to be your new starting center. Despite him being 31, 32 years of age, this is a former Pro Bowler, a guy who's had a lot of playoff experience and has been a very good center in this league for an extended period of time with his days in Kansas City and the Buffalo Bills. Mitch Morse signed a 2-year, $10.5 million contract with $7 million in guaranteed money. This is going to be huge for the Jaguars because take a look at what Mitch Morse did last season for the Buffalo Bills. Now, per PFF, Mitch Morse in 730 pass blocking snaps allowed 31 quarterback pressures and just allowed 1 sack. And compare that to Luke Fortner, who absolutely regressed last season. Luke Fortner in 749 pass blocking snaps allowed 28 quarterback pressures, 3 quarterback hits, and 4 QB sacks. That is not going to get the job done protecting my franchise quarterback. And despite, like I said, Mitch Morse being 32 years of age, you have a legitimate average to above average starting center who's going to help bolster that offensive line, especially in the interior, and it looks significantly better with Mitch Morse here. That is going to be a huge upgrade for the Jaguars, and I'm excited to have this guy here. Now let's talk about another Buffalo Bill that the Jaguars have signed. Former 4th-round pick back in 2020 from the University of Central Florida, Gabriel Davis. He signed a 3-year, $50 million contract, $39 million in guaranteed money. And Gabe Davis, I am super excited to have this guy here in Jacksonville. The Jaguars desperately needed an X receiver to play on the outside, opposite side of Zay Jones. Once Calvin Ridley went, even though at the time we had signed Gabe Davis, Calvin Ridley hadn't been a Titan yet. Nonetheless, you still bring in a quality wide receiver who I think is only going to continue to get better. Gabe Davis reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, before coming to Jacksonville, had never eclipsed 1,000+ yards in a season, and I see that kind of hierarchy with a guy like Gabe Davis, a guy who has never eclipsed 1,000 yards in a season. You've seen flashes of potential of being great, even though he was playing opposite side of Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis now has an opportunity at a young age to continue continue to flourish and to make that contract look a lot better 2-3 years down the road when he's producing here in Jacksonville. He's obviously going to be a huge vertical and deep threat. He can take the top off of a defense, and he's going to be critical for this Jaguars team. Now, Gabe Davis is not a receiver number one. I think the Jaguars still need to address that via trade, but the Jaguars still have a lot of great weapons surrounding Gabe Davis. Take a look at what he did in 2023 with the Buffalo Bills. 78 targets, 45 receptions, 746 yards, 7 touchdowns. He only had 4 drops, and he had a 50% contested catch rate and an 87.9 passer rating when targeted. Gabe Davis also, like I said, is an explosive player. 95 explosive plays, which is 15 plus yards since entering the league in 2020. And Davis has also generated a first down or a touchdown on 76.7% of his catches, which is the most in the NFL since 2020. That is a crazy stat when you really think about it. He's going to help open up that part of the field for the Jaguars, and I think he's going to be exceptional for the Jaguars in 2024, especially if we can get an Adonai Mitchell, a Brian Thomas in the draft, maybe T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk. Nonetheless, Gabriel Davis in Jacksonville, this is going to be a very good move. Now let's go ahead and talk about Darnell Savage coming over from the Green Bay Packers. He was a former first-round pick back in 2019, former Maryland Terrapin, and the Jaguars signed him to a 3-year, $21.75 million contract, $12.5 million in guaranteed money. And when you take a look at what the Jaguars' needs were, they needed another guy who could play in the nickel, a guy who could play at safety, and a guy you could line up all over the field. I really wanted Darnell Savage or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson before coming into free agency, and the Jaguars addressed it. If you take a look at what Darnell Savage did this past season in 12 games for the Packers, including the postseason, in 558 defensive snaps, he had 40 tackles, he was targeted 16 times, he allowed 13 catches, unfortunately, and had a 96.1 passer rating when targeted in coverage. But I do see Darnell Savage as a guy who is very versatile. Like I said, you could line this guy up all over the field. You can play him at free safety, line him up at nickel, you can put him on tight ends, you can line him up in the box. This is a guy who's exceptionally talented when you talk about his athletic ability, and I see Darnell Savage going out there and making a lot of plays in this Ryan Nielsen defense for the Jaguars in 2024. Now let's go ahead and talk about former second-round pick back in 2015 from Florida State University. The Jaguars brought in Ronald Darby from the Baltimore Ravens on a 2-year, up to $10 million contract. I'm not sure what the guaranteed money is off the top of my head, but Ronald Darby's been a very good cornerback in this league. I do believe he is going to play opposite side of Tyson Campbell. Unless the Jaguars take a corner in the first round that can play on the outside, then you'd probably move Darby to the nickel. But as of right now, I really like this signing from Ronald Darby as well too. It gives you an insurance plan and get to a proven veteran in this league to play opposite side of Tyson Campbell. Take a look at what Ronald Darby's done in the NFL since 2022. 525 coverage snaps, 31 receptions allowed, 353 yards, only 1 touchdown allowed, 10 forced incompletions, and a 75.2 passer rating when targeted in coverage. This is a great press man corner who's going to help on the outside. Like I said, you can move him into the nickel if you so choose, and I think this is going to be a very good under-the-radar signing for the Jaguars. Even though you did let Darius Williams go, who's going to be, I believe, 31 years of age. He went to the LA Rams. I really like Ronald Darby coming here to Jacksonville, and I do think he's going to be a very under-the-radar type of move for this Jags team. Now let's go ahead and talk about another Baltimore Raven coming here to the Jacksonville Jaguars, former Texas Longhorn Devin Duvernay, and this is a kick return specialist that the Jaguars are getting. The Jaguars are no longer going to have Jamal Agnew. Of course, I'm going to be heartbroken and saddened by that because you know me, all my homies love Jamal Agnew, but nonetheless, the Jaguars get one of the best returners in the game of football in Devin Duvernay, and like I addressed earlier, the Jaguars value special teams, and that's exactly what this move is. Devin Duvernay in 2023 had 12 kick returns, 227 yards, which is about 18.9 yards on average. But if you look at the majority of his career, he has been a much better return man than 2023 suggests. Since coming into the league back in 2020, Devin Duvernay averages nearly 25 yards per return. He has 2 kicker off returns, 4 touchdowns, and he also had a 103-yard return back in 2022. And while Devin Duvernay can be a serviceable wide receiver down on the depth chart in a pinch if you needed him to be, he's obviously not going to be asked to be utilized a lot in a lot of offensive play calling and a lot lot of offensive schemes. He's going to be a great return man, and he's going to help make the special teams for the Jaguars great again. And getting into the last home run signing for the Jaguars, it was with Arik Armstead coming over from the San Francisco 49ers. He was a former first-round pick out of the University of Oregon back in 2015, drafted by, guess who? Trent Baalke. It comes back full circle, and now Arik Armstead is going to be featured in a defensive line with guys like Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, Arik Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Roy Robertson Harrison. You are looking like you've got some serious depth now with the Jaguars in that front seven, and of course they're going to do more to address that maybe later on in free agency and throughout the draft. But this Jaguars front seven looks significantly better with Arik Armstead here. Armstead signed a 3-year, $51 million contract, which is about $17 million on average. And this is going to be a huge signing for the Jaguars. Armstead comes in at about 6'7", 290 pounds. He's going to be a force on the interior for this Jags defense, not just with the run stopping ability, but his ability to get home to the quarterback and to put pressure on the quarterback in the middle, in the interior. He's got an array of moves, and he's going to help make life a lot easier for Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker coming off the edges when you get that kind of push in the middle. Take a look at what Arik Armstead has done for the 49ers since 2022. 72 quarterback pressures, 7 sacks, and of course, does it help playing in a front seven that features guys like Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, etc.? Of course it does, but he's still going to be a force to be reckoned with for this Jaguars team. And take a look at what he's done in the postseason. He has been a dominant force even in the playoffs. 2019 through 2023 in the playoffs, Arik Armstead, 44 quarterback pressures, 8 sacks, and 30 quarterback hurries. This is not a regular season merchant. This guy shows up when the lights are the brightest, unlike James Harden. Arik Armstead, I'm telling you, this defensive front seven is going to be significantly better with a guy like him here. And before I wrap up this video, I did forget to mention a couple of other guys that the Jaguars lost this offseason. Darius Williams went to the Rams, Foley Fatukasi went to the Texans, and the Jaguars also lost Rayshawn Jenkins, who ended up going to the Seattle Seahawks. I wish all of those guys the best, wish them well, except for Calvin Ridley when he plays us twice a year. That's about it. But before I go ahead and wrap up this video, Jags fans, if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys go ahead and drop me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. And make sure that you guys also go ahead and follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm active and I'm on there every single day. Jags fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below about Trent Baalke's offseason. What did you make of the moves that the Jaguars have done? And also, do you think that the Jaguars should still go out there and try to make a move for Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you guys have any other video ideas you guys want me to cover in these next couple of weeks, please drop your thoughts in the comments down below. But Jags fans, thanks again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. And like always, let's go Jags.